Welcome to chapter 4 of the book of Lamentations, written by Jeremiah. The rage of the Lord completed as far as the completion of the summary by Jeremiah. Doesn't mean that the Lord has completely completed any rage that he's had, but during this period of time where Jeremiah is living and the things that he sees, to him, it's the rage has been completed. To the children of Israel, the sons of Israel. Now, I look at this, and I'm looking at it in a Christian perspective, and the Christian perspective isn't quite the same as a Jewish perspective. The Jews are still around, of course, and Christians are around. The Jews basically are a people, a race, and a country, both. A lot of the Jews don't live in the country anymore. They live all over the world. But Israel has become a country, so these people are both. Christians are all over the world. Every country in the world have Christians probably. And the Christians, as far as a country goes and a nationality, boy, you look in history and so many supposed Christian countries have fought against each other, warred against each other. It was the 20th century. I was just talking to my friend Rich today, how the 20th century, this past century, was one of the bloodiest in history. Between the wars, this First World War, devastating, Second World War, and then the United States had the Korean War, the Vietnamese War, which affected everybody in those countries, and then you had the despots who were killing people, Pol Pot, what's the name of the man in China? I can't think of his name. Joseph Stalin in Russia, Chairman Mao in China, and then the Japanese destruction of the Chinese when they went into Manchuria. It goes on and on. So that the Christians are all over, and they're not any one country. Now, the things that Jeremiah brings out here on the finality of what's happening at this time that he's living in, if God can do that to this nation, then he can do it again, and he has. He did it with the Roman time, not only in Jeremiah's time, but in the time of the Romans. Then they were destroyed, the Jews were destroyed. So if you're Jewish and you're living in Israel and you think that you are going to be safe, if you're living in sin and ungodliness, not doing the things of God at all, boy, you're very deluded. I don't know who is deluding you to think that, but I believe you are deluded. Now, I believe I was deluded. I believe that the church that I started going to, in 1979, when they were teaching all these things, how when they saw that Israel became a nation again, there's the work of God, and it's going to be a blessing to the world and all this. Well, now after going through these books of Isaiah, Jeremiah, Lamentation, Ezekiel, and all the prophets, I don't see it that way at all. I see it actually the opposite. I see a country now that is in existence only to bring in the beast, which will cause a destruction on the world as we have never seen, Satan incarnate. But we'll see what Jeremiah has to say at that time. And you can look at, is it possible that these conditions still occur, and the results, could they be the same? Oh, how the gold shall be darkened, and the good silver changed. Holy stones were discharged at the top of all the streets. Now, I'm thinking that this is talking about the Temple Mount area, how they destroyed the temple, the stones rolled down, and that was really occurred during Herod's temple at the Roman time. But the temple gold and silver being tarnished from either a fire and so forth. The esteemed sons of Zion, which they are in Zion again, being encouraged by gold, oh, how they are considered as earthenware receptacles, works of the hands of the potter. They were esteemed sons of Zion. So gold, riches, has to do with what they were doing, the condition that they were under, money, material, and now they're considered, instead of a gold, they're earthenware receptacles, just the works of the hands of a potter, which can be broken very easily, and they were. And indeed, dragons stripped the breasts. And that's a figure of speech. Dragons didn't do this, but they stripped the breasts. They nursed their cubs. The daughters of my people were for irretrievability as a sparrow in the wilderness. There's nothing that they could do. God is in control completely, and what He's going to do, He's going to do. It's just like the little sparrow in the wilderness. It can only do what God allows it to do. The tongue of one nursing cleaves to its throat in thirst. So now he gets into the conditions in Jerusalem, I believe, and thirsty from being surrounded and not having water. Although I don't know why they wouldn't have water, because I believe they had Hezekiah's tunnel, which brought water in. But infants ask for bread, and there is not one snapping it for them. The ones eating the delicacies were removed in the streets. So people going out and eating wonderful foods would be sort of like us today, where you have different vendors selling things in cities, and all of a sudden it's just all gone. They're gone. You don't have any food anywhere. You look for it, and you're starving to death, and the child is, it says here, and the ones having been suckled in scarlet were embracing dung. And the lawlessness of the daughter of my people was magnified over the lawlessness of Sodom. What a condemnation. So if God looks and condemns the people of Israel at that time, their lawlessness was over the lawlessness of Sodom, what does He think about Israel today? There's no temple, there's no priesthood. Homosexuals march and have parades and festivals in the cities, and you'd have to wonder what what it sees in Israel today. The place being eradicated as with promptness, and they toiled not in her hands. Her Nazarites were clean, and Jesus, they called him the Nazarene. Nazarites were people that were men that were dedicated to God, and they couldn't, I don't know exactly, well, Jesus drank wine, so I'm not exactly sure. I should have written down what the Nazarites, it had something to do with cutting their hair, as I remember, and letting it grow longer. And they radiated more than snow. Everybody could see a Nazarite. They'd know who this Nazarite was. They were purified more than milk. Their broken pieces were above stone of sapphire. The worst case scenario of a Nazarite was better than a sapphire stone, sparkling. They were the best, the creme de la creme, the top rank of the Jews, the Nazarites. But their appearance darkened above lamp black. They are not recognized in the streets. Their skin was fixed against their ostah, bones, and they are dried up. They were as wood, that is for burning. So this is what happened to these Nazarites, the best of the Jews at that time. Better were the ones slain by broadsword than the ones slain of hunger. They went being pierced by one of produce of the field. Better just to die in fighting than starving slowly. The hands of pitying women boiled their children. This was apparently when Jerusalem was surrounded. And they became for food to them in the destruction of the daughter of my people. That could have happened then. Can it happen again? The Lord completed his rage. He poured out the rage of his anger and lit a fire in Zion. And that's where Jerusalem is, and it devoured her foundations. So Jerusalem is destroyed. The kings of the earth believed it not, all the ones inhabiting and the ones living, that an enemy and one afflicting shall enter through the gates of Jerusalem. So the same today. So the nations were amazed that Jerusalem was taken, big city on the high wall, and the city today is very strong. A lot of people believe that Jerusalem today couldn't be taken, that it's with the far as it's the Jews control it, since they took it over in, let's see, when was that? 1960, no, the Second War. I'm not sure, in the 70s, but they went in and took Jerusalem. Moshe Dayan, I guess he was a general, had a patch over his eye. May have seen pictures of him. And so Israel has taken control of Jerusalem, and I'm sure they feel that nobody else is going to ever take it away from them again. They've built up quite an army, nuclear weapons apparently, and the president, Netanyahu, made a speech about a year ago in the United Nations saying that no more will anything like the Holocaust happen. The Jews are back. So the gates of Jerusalem. But Jerusalem was rebuilt after this, and then with Nehemiah, Ezra and Nehemiah, until the Romans came and destroyed it again. From the sins of her prophets, propheton, and iniquities of her priests, pouring out just blood in her midst. And I look at that with Jesus. I think about in the future how the innocent blood, how Pontius Pilate said that this just man, and he washed his hands from the blood of this man, where the Jews said, his blood be upon us and our children. Her watchmen, those ones in Jerusalem who were in charge, in the streets, they were tainted in blood in their not being able. They touched their garments with the blood. They were tainted. Now, exactly how they were tainted, it doesn't say here. Were they tainted by killing somebody, and therefore they had blood liable on their hands? This is what I'm guessing it is, or it could be with after the destruction, and these people were slaughtered. Separate from the unclean. Call them. Separate. Do not touch. For they were lit. They're like set on fire. And indeed, they were shaken. Speak among the nations. In no way should they proceed to sojourn, to go. And this is like, they're not supposed to go out and leave, but yet these people were being taken away. The person of the Lord was their portion. He shall not proceed to look upon them. Wow. So the Lord was their portion, and I look at Israel today, and I certainly don't see the Lord being their portion. I don't see their attitude as being towards the Lord. There's so many atheists, especially the ones that came from the Soviet Union. And so he shall not proceed to look upon them. God does not look upon you anymore. Then because of your sins, then you're in a bad shape. The person of the priests they received not. They did not show mercy on old men. Yet, in our being, our eyes failed. Our watching for our help was in vain. We watched into a nation not delivering, and probably talking about Egypt here. They hunted our small ones to not go in our squares. Our time approached. Our days were fulfilled. Our end is at hand, he says. The end is here. The ones pursuing us were nimble, more than eagles of heaven. Upon the mountains they perched. In a wilderness they lie and wait for us, like the eagle way up and seeing and waiting for something to devour, can see far off, and lying in wait. So lying in wait for Israel and the attack. The breath of our face and the pneuma, the wind, the spirit, the breath of our face, spirit or wind, the anointed one, the Lord was seized in our corruptions, of whom we said, in his shadow we shall live among the nations. The Christos, there it is, the Christ, Christ Kyrios, Christ the Lord, the breath of our face, the spirit of our face, of our being, the Christ of the Lord was seized in our corruptions. There it is. Jesus is being shown here in the book of Lamentations, because it says Kyrios when it's L-O-R-D is Yahweh. The anointed one, the Lord, was seized in our corruption. So who else could it be? When was the Kyrios was not seized in their corruptions at this time? The Lord was not. How could the Lord be seized? Only the way the Lord could be seized is if he was seizable. And when he took human form, he made himself available to be seized, which he was. And it was in the sins of the people that were taking him and seizing him, and of whom we said, in his shadow we shall live among the nations. Now, if they're talking about the Messiah, the Christos, in his shadow we shall live among the nations. Now, I'm not certain here how they're saying, if they're saying this or if he's saying this for in the future, that this is what they should be saying. In his shadow we shall live among the nations, or is it they were saying this? I believe was probably the something that they will say. Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Edom. That was the country to the east of the Dead Sea and the south, the one dwelling upon the land of Uz. And indeed unto you shall go through the cup of the Lord, and that is the rage. You shall be intoxicated, and shall pour, and that is the cup, shall pour forth the rage. Your lawlessness vanished, O daughter of Zion. He shall not proceed over the resettling you. He visited your lawlessness, O daughter of Edom. He revealed concerning your acts of impiety. So Edom, the country, we know the southern part of Edom will be irradiated, maybe, and uninhabitable along with the southern part of the Negev of Israel. It mentions that in the book of Ezekiel. The last chapter, chapter 5, Jeremiah laments the destruction. So we will finish up with Jeremiah's lament in chapter 5, our next video seminar, and hope you'll join us. God bless.